Hello everybody, my name is Austin Shaner and welcome to my channel. So I'm going to be starting a series here on how to CAD model a electric guitar in Fusion 360. Now, just as a side note, I'm an experienced designer. I've been CAD modeling for 15 years or more, and I've used just about any kind of CAD modeling software out there. And still, even though I've done some really tough projects, the humble guitar seems to really give me and a lot of other people a lot of troubles. It's got a really complicated shape, especially if you get a little more tricky with it. And there's a lot of technique that goes into it and a lot of skill that you're going to have to learn with whatever software you're using in order to do that appropriately or cleanly for that matter. What I'd like to go over is some of the lessons I've learned on my journey learning how to build an electric guitar in Fusion 360. And I've certainly been where a lot of other people have been. So this was, for example, my first guitar that I ever tried to model. This was roughly based off the Tosin Abasi guitar from Animals as Leaders. I really thought it was a really unique design that you just don't see out in the very commonly. And so I tried to roughly mimic that, but as soon as I started to, dig into the details, like some of these relief cuts and the pockets and fillets and all that, it got hairy real quickly, and then my model just wasn't working the way I anticipated. I've also tried to model based off of a picture. I thought this guitar looked amazing at one point, and I still do for that matter, and I wanted to model something like that, and I started to, but then I realized that I didn't know how to do this loft section, and that was going to be really tricky. So I dug in a little bit on this model, and this was my second best attempt, and I got really far into it. But as you can see, in some of these back sections I did like a big sweep cut here, and everything just doesn't transition very nicely. There's a lot of patched surfaces, things that I couldn't figure out at the time how to do very cleanly. And so it left kind of a rough model, and you can see here at the volute area, the neck transition, it's better. It's actually one of my better attempts at that, but I basically just extruded that into this body and ran a fillet across it. That actually works fairly well, but if you're going to be seeing something, CNCing something precision, you might want to go for something a little bit better. So I'm going to start this series off by talking about how to lay out your design, and then we're going to go into how to build the body, how to build the neck, how to construct all of these transitions between those two, the differences between bolt-on guitars, or sorry, bolt-on necks and through necks, etc., or set necks for that matter, and maybe how you would change your approaches for doing those different style models. But this is now I'll show you my current version. This is the most recent model that I've been working on, and as you can see, let me change this real quick. As you can see, I've gotten much cleaner in how I've approached these. All of my transitions are smooth, they're simple faces, and rather than a bunch of patched surfaces. Mostly big sweeping surfaces that cover those areas. My neck transition has gotten a lot better, still not perfect. So you can still see a little hint of a line there. I was planning on sanding that whenever I came to make it and just smoothing that out a little bit. But I can show you how to get something like that that's got a pretty nice smooth transition. So let's go ahead and let's start part one about planning out your design. And I hope you guys enjoy the ride, and I hope we both learn something and have a good time. Thanks. So I've already gone ahead and opened up a new model. As you can see, I've already sketched out what I would roughly like this guitar to look like. This is actually a sketch copied from the previous one that I was just showing you. But you may not have that, obviously, since you're just going to be starting this. So where do you start? Well, everything on a guitar is really based around fret spacing, right? Where the strings land, where the nuts land, where the bridge lands, where the actual fret wire goes, the truss rod, everything is based off of the strings. And so what I've found that really helps me lay a good foundation for my CAD model is to start with a rough sketch of where your scale length and your frets are going to lie. And that actually gives you an added benefit of giving you a grid in your sketch that actually helps you anchor a lot of your sketches to. So that way you can, let's say I want the tip of this wing here to start at the 13th fret, right? And so you can actually anchor it to the 13th fret and guarantee that's where it's going to land. So what I always recommend people do is when you're about to start modeling a guitar, model your scale, or your scale length and your fret. So a really helpful tool for this that I found is Fret Find 2D. You can see up here, this is the link. I can go ahead and put that in the description below. But what this lets you do is fine tune your design, and it actually spits out a DXF or an SVG file that you can then import into Fusion 360. So I don't have time to go through this whole tool, but essentially once you get the design you like, and this can, by the way, can also handle fanned frets, once you get the scale length you like, the space, the string spacing, all of that, go ahead and export it as an SVG or a DXF, and then you can come and insert DXF or SVG right here. And then once it's in there, you can use that as your building block. What I have found though is that SVGs and DXFs in Fusion 360 don't play very well with other sketches sometimes. What I really like to do is import that and then use that as a reference for drawing my own fretboard. So for example, some of my dimensions got a little screwed up. But you can see here what I've actually done is I didn't know these numbers. I used that calculator to figure out what these numbers should be, and I dropped in that model, and then I went ahead and modeled this separately. And what that actually allowed me to do is give me really good construction lines that Fusion 360 recognizes. So again, what I'd recommend is you use that Fret Finder 2D. You get your design of your fretboard that you'd like, import that into Fusion 360, and then use the dimensions off of there to go ahead and redraw it and then anchor it to where you want. I do recommend as well that when you're doing this, you actually anchor the origin point to somewhere around the middle of the frets. The reason why I say that is later on when you're modeling, if your origin point is like way out here, it's going to get really kind of tough to maneuver the model around, because everything's going to center off of that. Whereas if you have it where I do in the middle, the whole model tends to revolve around the center of gravity, essentially, of the model. And so I would say when you draw that, make sure your anchor point's somewhere in the middle, or closer to the body for that matter. So now that we've got our foundation laid, which is the fretboard, now we can start taking into consideration what the headstock is going to look like and what the body is going to look like. I personally, again, really like to draw out my whole design first before I extrude anything. I don't mean necessarily you draw out all the different contours that you're going to be putting in there, but the rough 2D outline of everything that I want, go ahead and draw that out before you extrude anything. So that way you can reference all of those sketches later on. So let's go ahead and draw a headstock on this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit sketch, and we'll come over here, hit that plane, and now you notice I can't actually sketch off of any of these points yet. So what we got to do is we actually got to bring in some of those dimensions from that previous sketch. So click on, what you can do is click on the line where the nut's going to be, hit the letter P on your keyboard, which will bring up the project menu, and then you can hit OK. What that's going to do is it's going to bring that line from that fretboard sketch into our current sketch. And if I change something in that fretboard sketch, it will also update where this is located in this sketch, so it's dynamic that way. So now if I sketch, now it actually recognizes that those points are there. It gives me a midpoint, an endpoint, and an endpoint. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to draw a rectangle like this. So now we can go ahead and make these construction lines. So click that, come over here, hit construction. So those are not going to impact how the body is going to extrude. It's just going to help us with getting some of our dimensions in place. So what I'm going to do is I know that I want this to be horizontal. So I'm going to come over here, hit horizontal, and we don't know roughly where we want, how long we want this to be. We just know we want these to extend straight out to give us something to base our headstock off of. So in my particular design, I'm using 2 curves, but it can be really any design you want. So I'm going to come up to here to create arc, 3-point arc, and I'm just going to start drawing arcs. I will constrain them later on. So I'm just going to go ahead and click here, here, and drag. You see that already gave me, if I do this, it gives me a tangent constraint, which says it's going to be tangent to that line, and that's great. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and draw this one. You can see it's the same thing. It's now tangent to that line. And so now, as I draw this around, it's anchoring that and making it tangent. So I'm going to go ahead and hit here, 3-point arc again, click this one, and I'm going to click this endpoint, and I want it to be tangent to that. So now this is tangent with this construction line. That's why we built it. And we're going to do the same thing over here. Come over here. But we're not going to click here because I want to create an arc from here to here. So I'm going to click earlier on, drag it over, make it tangent to that line, click, and so now I have this, but it's not anchored anywhere. So I'm going to do one more arc. I'm going to go from this point that we just drew in to this point that we just drew in and create a little bit of an arc. Now, obviously this doesn't look very good yet. We're going to go ahead and give this some dimensions. So we know, well, in the case of me, I know that I would like these two to be equal. But I don't necessarily just want to hit equal yet, because sometimes in Fusion 360, if you just start hitting constraints, things will go haywire really quickly. So we know that we want this to be vertical with that. Now you can do a vertical constraint, but I also like to have construction lines that I can later attach things to. So I drew another construction line from here to here. Click on that and make that vertical. Now those are going to be perfect, but now, as you'll be able to see, I can draw that up and down. So what we want to do is draw one more construction line, find the midpoint, you see that triangle, to this midpoint, click here, make that a construction line, and make that horizontal. So now that's perfectly symmetrical and it's going to move in the same scale. So now let's go ahead and give ourselves a rough dimension of what we would like this to be. I'm just going to say 7 inches for now, but we can change that later if we want. And now we can start seeing this taking shape. So I can move this like that, move this over here, and I can start getting a rough idea of what I'd like it to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and define this I'm just going to pick a round number of 1.5, and you can see this is also now constrained. Because these two were vertical, I didn't need to do an equal constraint between the two. And I actually don't need to define this arc either. I could if I would like to, but I know that I would like to just define the dimension between that line and that point. And I'm just going to say 3/4 of an inch. So that's 3/4 of an inch. So now this one is fully locked in. It can't move anymore. And that's based off this length here. So if I change this to 6, this stays put, but that can go far. Oop. Go back to 7. And then now we just need to decide where this anchor point is going to be. So I'm just going to keep everything pretty consistent, and I'm going to go from here to here. It's 0.75. And so the only thing left is, where does this arc sit? What's the radius of this arc? It's not tangent to anything yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say I want this to be tangent to that construction line that we drew in the first step. So come up here, hit the tangent, and now we've got our headstock. So let me go ahead and exit that. And there you go. Now you've got the neck and the headstock. So now that we've got the headstock and the fretboard schematic, essentially, what we can go ahead and do is start working on the body. Now, the body can take a little while to draw because, especially if you don't know exactly what you'd like to draw. So if you don't know exactly what you're trying to draw, this could take a while and it can get a little squirrely. So what you can do is just basically hit sketch, just like we did before, draw on there. And then what I've found that really works really well for the body is to, at the very first thing, create a boundary box. Make it a construction line, just like we did with the headstock. And that way we know that we don't want the body to go beyond this point. So that touches all the furthest points of the body. What that'll do, in conjunction with projecting in some of the lines from our fretboard, is it will give us, like before, a bunch of anchor points that we can use. So what I did here in my design is I just drew a bunch of series of arcs and made them tangent to each other. So you can see that I gave myself a construction line here, so that way I could dimension from the bottom of this valley to the tip. And I made that 1/4 of an inch, and I dimensioned that from the fretboard here, so that way it locked it in place. And then I drew one arc here, tangent into this arc here. So I did all of that in only two lines. And then I drew an arc here, an arc here that went all the way from up here down here, one at the bottom of this radius, one that swept all the way up where your leg rest is going to be down to here, and then I needed an extra radius here in order to transition smoothly into this piece. And then I tried to make this look roughly similar to the one up here, and then I had to do 2 arcs here, one smaller, one larger, and then I basically just picked which fret I would like this to come back into the fretboard on. You can go really far back, you can go really far forward. It just depends on how you would like your guitar to play. So that's going to be entirely up to you. I would say definitely if it's a bolt-on neck, give yourself a lot of room right here to bolt the neck on. You're going to want probably at least 3, if not 4 or more screws and maybe ferrules to bolt that neck on. So make sure to give yourself plenty of room in this little section right here. And then here I just did another set of curves, made them tangent to each other, made them tangent to here, and then just connected the whole piece together. I realize I kind of rushed through that with you guys, but everybody's design is going to be unique. But the big takeaways here are project in lines from your schematic. Just start drawing a bunch of arcs. Well, sorry, first draw a boundary box of roughly the size you'd want. Start drawing a bunch of arcs. get it roughly to where you want, and then start adding a bunch of dimensions to get it fully constrained. That's essentially what it is, and that's going to take you probably a while to really fine-tune the shape and contour of that guitar. But really, you're just looking for the outer profile. What do you want that outer profile to look like? If you're trying to like mimic a Strat or a Telecaster or something, you can always insert a canvas or something like a picture to draw off of. But I'd recommend just playing. Just start drawing. Start adding some constraints, seeing what kind of cool designs you can come up with, and then the end goal is every line should be black, showing that it's fully constrained. And when you are satisfied with that, go ahead and close it out. So now we've got our body, our schematic for our fretboard, and our headstock. Notice we haven't actually extruded anything. We don't have anything solid yet. We just have a sketch. You can imagine where I'm probably going to go with this, but I'm going to project all of these lines that we've drawn. So spend a lot of time getting these right, and I'm going to project all of those lines onto our later surfaces, and it will help me anchor everything else in the design. So I would say spend the majority of your time trying to get this really dialed in to how you would like it to look from a front view, and then we can go from there. So I will see you in the next part.